Tonight on 16 by 9, is this what you call fun and games?
I got threats of death, threats of violence, threats of rape.
Women gamers bullied online. Here's Carolyn Jarvis.
Good evening and welcome to 16 by 9. We've all heard about bullying on Twitter and Facebook. Now there's another disturbing online trend, bullying through video games. Our Sophie Louie explored this darker side of cyberland and found when you pick up a controller, you're leaving yourself open to threats of violence, harassment, and abuse. And as she uncovered, all too often, the targets are women. A warning, some of the language you're about to hear may be offensive.
So we've got a few, like, tits or get the out, show me your tits, you disgust me, you fucking bitch.
When Anita Sarkeesian goes online, this is what greets her. Anita hasn't committed some terrible crime worthy of insults and threats. The offense committed by the pop culture critic and lifelong gamer was posting this video online to raise money to examine gaming and female stereotypes.
What I try to do in my videos is give people the language to understand and talk about issues of gender and sexism. I'm going to look at the damsel in distress, the fighting toy, the sexy sidekick, the sexy villainess, and the most common trope in video games, women as background decoration.
She launched her campaign in May 2012. The backlash was almost instantaneous. Comments flooded in by the thousands.
The most vile, misogynist, sexist, and frankly racist comments. I got threats of death, threats of violence, threats of rape. It was really intense.
I have a hard time even hearing the words, "I hope you get raped tonight."
Yeah. And you should.
The harassment escalated when Anita's Wikipedia page was vandalized with pornographic images. Attempts were made to hack her website, and threats were made against her personal safety.
Was it frightening?
Yeah, there was definitely moments that were scary.
Anita says she's being harassed for no other reason than that she wants to examine a world, the gaming world, which has for years belonged to men.
It's very male-dominated, and I think with that male domination comes a sense of entitlement. That these games are for men by men, and that women, if they're going to participate, they need to shut up.
Anita calls her attackers a cyber mob, deliberately trying to silence her. Things got even more graphic when this showed up online. A game called Beat Up Anita Sarkeesian, made and posted by an Ontario gamer.
It was gross. Like, frankly, it was just really vile and disgusting.
16 by 9 asked the man behind the game, Bendalin Spur, for an on-camera interview. Spur turned down our request, instead sending emails saying that women and men are treated no differently on interactive mediums. And the game he made has nothing to do with Anita being female, but instead beat-up games like this are common whenever someone does something controversial.
I think the problem that's happening here is I haven't actually made my videos. I haven't said anything.
He continues with,
The games are not meant as a threat. They're not meant to intimidate. He goes on to say he was criticizing your project as a person in the media.
To make a game to beat me up and then hide behind this idea of we're just trying to have a conversation, I mean, I don't think anyone will buy that, or anyone would think that that was an acceptable form of communication.
It may be a virtual world, but harassment is very real, says Anita. When a woman picks up a controller, she could be caught in the crosshairs.
I mean, you talk to any woman who games online and they will have stories about the harassment they faced. My case is fairly extreme in terms of its magnitude, but that shouldn't mean that getting one comment a day isn't absolutely horrible.
One comment a day is all it takes to make it on this site, fatuglyOrslutty.com.
So the categories that we've had since the start has been crudely creative, death threats, fat, sandwich making 101, X-rated.
That's Grace, your typical female gamer. She created Fat, Ugly, or Slutty after friends told her some of the things they experienced while playing online. At first, she thought it would be funny to post the obscene comments, writing it off as juvenile behavior. She quickly realized she was onto something.
As it turns out, from the reaction the website had, a lot of other people didn't really understand what women experience in online games.
I'm going to murder you, not just you, everyone you know. I'm going to take a knife, cut out your eyeballs if you're still alive.
The site has since become a virtual garbage bin of insults, crude messages, and filthy audio recordings female gamers receive on a daily basis from virtual strangers.
Death threats.
Death threats, absolutely. Death threats, rape threats, sexual invitations, sexual demands, picture demands, nude demands, descriptions of their genitalia.
In the world of online gaming, players are known by their gamer names and talk to each other via headset or writing messages through the console. People can play against players from around the world by signing into the various networks. It's supposed to enhance the playing experience, but the threat of bullying has made Grace weary.
If I can't get my friends together at one time to all play, I probably won't play that game that day. I'll go find something else to do.
Since players can play anyone, the trick, Grace says, is disguise your gender, mask any reference to womanhood. Choose a name that's too feminine or use your real voice, and you become a target. According to Grace, that's unfair.
I have a lot of women friends who've grown that thick skin, but I don't see why I have to grow that thick skin of people asking to see my boobs. Sorry, demanding to see my boobs. Well, I just want to shoot some aliens.
The stereotype of a gamer might be a basement-dwelling adolescent boy, but the truth is 46% of Canadian gamers are women. Grace says women are at the greatest risk, easily identified and called out. A risk, she says, the industry needs to eradicate.
If we try and improve those systems, then we can actually start injecting consequence and we can break the equation.
Stephen Toulouse used to be the sheriff of the gaming world, policing the internet as director of policy and enforcement for Microsoft's Xbox Live.
The video game community is sort of well known, I guess, in a way, for combative communication during a game, where trash talk is what it's typically called. There's a level at which that's normal and expected, then there's a level at which that it's not.
Stephen and his team of enforcers upheld Xbox's code of conduct, which includes don't be a jerk, no harassing, and no cheating. Break the code and Stephen came after you.
We had the ability to temporarily mute you so that no one could hear you on the system. We had the ability to, again, suspend people from the system for egregious behavior, all the way down to preventing their console from ever connecting to Xbox Live again.
And he did shut gamers down, but it was an uphill battle. With over 40 million subscribers worldwide, Stephen saw the worst of gaming behavior.
I've spent a lot of time trying to understand why people behave badly online. Well, the first is audience. They have an audience, a worldwide audience. The second is they have anonymity, or at least a measure of anonymity that prevents the third thing, which is consequences. They don't really have a lot of consequences. It's just that the problem is when you have 40 million people, that vocal minority can be comprised of 1 million people. It doesn't tend to be, slightly over the line. It tends to be extremely over the line. Notice it's always the jerk who says it's part of the game.
Next on 16 by 9, boys being boys?
I've heard people say that this is harmless. It's not.
There's nothing fun about this kind of play.
When video games first came on the scene 40 years ago, nobody predicted what would happen next. A mind-blowing technology, a multi-billion-dollar industry, and legions of fans worldwide from all walks of life.
I remember when I was young how inclusive this community was. If you didn't fit in elsewhere, gaming had open arms for you.
That's James Portnow. He's been playing since he was 5. Now he makes his living as a designer, teacher, and gaming consultant.
Games, to me, are the first interactive mass medium. They're the first medium where you have an audience that doesn't just sit there receptive like you do with television or film, but instead can interact.
James has watched gaming evolve from this to this. Shooter games, team games, fantasy games, video games have hit the mainstream, with a gaming device in almost every home and 60% of Canadians playing. But as games attract more players, a dark side has been growing: online bullying.
You get a lot of players who will permanently quit games because they experience somebody harassing somebody else.
James decided to take on those players, confronting their behavior with this video for an online web program.
This stuff represents the worst in our community. It's antithetical to everything games are about. I've heard people say that this is harmless. It's not.
James also calls out the industry, game designers and professionals, to provide gamers with better tools to combat harassment directly.
If your game is a highly competitive game, you should be able to include methods to curb some of these things or empower your community within the design itself.
Methods include muting other players, rating behavior, harsher penalties, and the ability to select specific people to play with. Because online, you never know who you could be against.
I've heard it said that this is just boys being boys. That's no excuse. Raise your kids better if this is what your 13-year-old writes to a woman he's never met. But it's really not just young boys. These are grown men who should know better.
The battle against intolerance is not only online, it's in the boardroom as well, making it hard for women to not only play games, but to get in the game. Brenda Bailey Gershkovitch has been playing since she was a child. She loved it so much that in 2005, she co-founded a startup game development studio in Vancouver, encountering men she says acted like boys.
I had to work on things like no beer before noon, and no porn in the studio, and rules that kind of in most businesses would be accepted and pretty normal, but I got a lot of pushback.
That frat boy culture drove Brenda to form Silicon Sisters in 2010 with business partner Kristen Forbes, Canada's first female-owned video game development company, designing games specifically for women, a huge untapped market.
We really think it's important that girls think about video games as a place where they can have their careers.
But women are not getting involved. Even though they make up almost half of all gamers, less than 10% of game designers are female, a statistic Brenda wants to change.
The difficulty is a lot of the people who are trying to provide content are doing it from a very male perspective.
And according to Brenda, change the industry, you can change behavior.
I also think the harassment within the industry as a whole is increasing, and it's my analysis of this is that the industry is changing, and whenever there's a lot of change, there's a lot of resistance.
Resistance felt by women across the gaming playing field, from executives down to players. But pop critic and gamer Anita Sarkeesian, who is still harassed for wanting to challenge video game stereotypes, still sees gaming's potential.
So despite everything you've gone through and continue to go through, how do you feel about video games?
I still love them. I think games are really where we're going. That I'm excited to see what happens as the culture grows up.